Welcome back to Liberty Bytes on the Think Liberty Network. I'm your host, William Gadsden. You can follow me personally on Twitter at William_Gadsden or on Facebook by the same name. Follow Think Liberty on Facebook, Twitter, or whatever your favorite social media outlet is. Give us a follow and a like for updates on new episodes and more. Now for this final episode of the American Tyrants series, I want to go over some of the broad strokes that we have seen throughout this series and really drive home what I can only hope you have learned by following us thus far. Now, first and foremost, the very nature of this series has taught us perhaps the most important lesson that can be learned, that history is rarely what we see on the surface. We've looked at some of the most widely celebrated presidents in American history, those that have statues, songs, books, and movies made to honor them. That we are taught from grade school through college that these men are to be admired and respected for the great strides that they have made for the country. But dig a little deeper, barely scratch the surface of the history behind these men, and we see the clay that is underneath the thin veneer of plated gold. We see them for what they are, men, certainly fallible men. But we also see that these men were no friends of liberty, quite the opposite. These were men that used their positions of power as a weapon, not as an opportunity to serve the people. With each example that we have discussed in this series, we see a pattern of expansionism that saw the originally small and comparatively low status of the office of the chief executive become the towering colossus of power that is the President of the United States today. We have seen what the Founding Fathers had originally intended to be the figurehead of the federal government, the advisor of Congress, become the unquestionable but very real leader of not only the United States, but of the free world. We have seen powers originally intended for Congress passed over willingly or unwillingly into the executive branch, some temporarily and many much more permanently. We saw how technology has been used to further the ends of authoritarianism through things like the bully pulpit, allowing the president to speak directly to the people, effectively circumventing their representation in Congress and placing leverage on incumbent congressional representatives with the ultimate goal of pushing their own agenda, rather than allowing a close relationship to form between the people and their own representation in Congress. This even has the perhaps unintended consequence of removing accountability and responsibility from those that we choose to represent us, and instead placing much of it on the president instead. We saw how those at the highest levels of our government will use a national crisis, whether it be civil unrest, war, or economic downturns, to use as an excuse to expand federal power and trample on individual liberties. There are oftentimes things that we cannot take back, especially after the passage of time further cements the new precedent and makes it part of the norm. We saw that if given the opportunity, the federal government will utilize our cries for help to their advantage, calling for regulation that will ostensibly help alleviate the present crisis, while at the same time pushing through policy and organizations that have nothing to do with the problem at hand. They are playing the long game, and we, the people, are losing it. But how did we get from there to here, though? We got here through complacency, through a lack of accountability, through willful ignorance on the part of we, the people. Whenever one of these men reached out for more power in one way or another, voices of dissent were either too quiet, too weak, or non-existent in the first place. Like the proverbial frog in the pot of boiling water, we have seen the incremental growth of centralized power in this country before our very eyes, and yet have done nothing about it. Our ancestors, and we ourselves, have allowed this to happen. We are seeing the slow death of our republic happening in real time throughout history, and what are we doing to stop it? Here is what we can do right here, right now. Educate ourselves. Simply by watching this series, you are starting to accomplish the first step in effecting change. You're becoming aware of the truth that lies just under the surface of history. But now you have to dig deeper. and inspire others to do the same. Take others on this journey into liberty with you. Then act on it. Spread the word. Spread the knowledge, and become active in any way that you can. In your communities, through the vote, through becoming involved with the myriad of pro-liberty organizations that exist across the country. Many even tailored specifically to whatever age group, area, or even lifestyle that you're currently in. We must be an active part of the solution, of the pushback against authoritarianism, because all it takes to be a part of the problem is to do nothing. Well, thanks for joining us, and I hope you'll come back next week as I basically have a hot wash of the midterm election. I hope you'll come back next time to listen to that and become more liberty-centered with us as well. I'm William Gadsden with Think Liberty.